All right. Hi, Ellen. We appreciate you very much speaking with us. We've had a good crowd here, and then by way of the technology, YouTube and Facebook. So everyone, Ellen Kreth is the publisher and editor and owner, right, of the Madison County Record. We've mentioned you a couple of times this morning.
I hope it was good.
But I have watched Ellen over the years on the FOIA task force that we've talked about. She's also has been president of the FOIA task force. Also a current member of the FOIA coalition. I've asked her to talk about those and how citizens can participate in those. But really, I hope Ellen will talk about the Huntsville case, which she has written on extensively. That's where some young people in the Huntsville School District were abused. There was student-to-student abuse, and Ellen has been unbelievable in terms of FOIA and getting the documents and writing about it and protecting our right to know. And she's done that in other instances, obviously, throughout the years, and just amazing work. Mike Masterson said he wished he had to leave, but he wanted to hear what you had to say and wants to personally meet you. So, but anyway, Ellen, I'll turn it over to you now. And
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I would love to be there and visit with you guys. I know we're all advocates and passionate about the Freedom of Information Act. To me, we use it for our newspaper, but to me, it is a citizen's right to know what goes on in their government, and I wish more people would use it. So I'm thrilled that you guys are having this today so that you can come together and talk about ways that we can use it and how important it is to us. As Joey said, I'm Ellen Kreth, and I'm the owner and the publisher of the Madison County Record in Huntsville. That newspaper has been in my family for years. I'm actually a third-generation owner of it. I'm a journalism graduate of the University of Alabama. I did go that way for just a little bit, but I came back to Arkansas. And I took a little departure from the newspaper business to go to law school and, you know, learn to use the laws. And the most important one being to me in my business now would be FOIA. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about how we use that in this instance of sexual assault that went on in the Huntsville School District. And then I want to talk a little bit about how I think FOIA can be, how other laws can be used to try to circumvent FOIA, and I think it's something that we all need to pay attention to. So I've learned that during this process, and I want to talk just a little bit about that, and then of course talk about the coalition and the task force. So let me start with the case in Huntsville, and even though I'm remote, if anybody wants to jump in and ask me any questions, I would love to answer them. I do better with feedback, so please don't hesitate to jump in and ask me or give me comments. I would love that. Back in March of 2021, we received what we call a Title IX document, Title IX complaint. And we received several of them. We received 3 or 4 from people in the community, and we also, interestingly enough, received one from an email that had been set up just to send us this report. The report detailed student interviews about sexual assaults that had taken place in the boys' locker room before and after basketball games. And the older boys called it a ritual, and they would baptize other players. And what they meant by that was actually sexually assaulting other players. We were surprised by it. Of course, the first thing we did was authenticate the report. You know, you just can't take something like that and assume that that's true. So we authenticated it, we got it from several other sources, and we started to interview people off the record and anonymously actually, just to get the background of the case. Parents were eager to talk to us. I know the Huntsville School District, as this case and story has progressed, they've kind of said, oh, you shouldn't write about that. You're hurting the victims when you write about that. And we've been very diligent in what we've said about the incidents that have taken place. And we've been very diligent of not naming victims, not naming the students who perpetrated the assaults on the other victims or their families. We have definitely protected their privacy, but the victims were the ones that brought us these reports. The victims wanted us to write about it because they felt like the Huntsville School District would absolutely sweep this under the rug. And we began to interview the parents and get some background information. We knew basketball season was over, and we had figured out at this point that this abuse had only taken place in the basketball program. We knew that it was not taking place in the baseball program, the sport or the track program. So we didn't act, within the first week or two that we received the report because we needed to authenticate it. And we wanted to make sure the students were safe, and that's why it was important for us to make sure that this abuse had stopped. So we waited for the school district to act because we knew it was up to them, and our focus needed to be on the school district's accountability to these students, and thereby we could protect their names and not bring the students into the story with names. So we began to interview the parents, and interestingly enough, the parents would say to us, well, that secret meeting that took place. We're thinking, secret meeting? No, we don't know anything about it. But then we realized that there was an appeals hearing going on. An appeals hearing, just a month or two after we got the report. An appeals hearing to us didn't make sense. What were they appealing from? There had to be another meeting. So we asked the superintendent, we put the whole story together, and we were ready to go with it. And we asked the superintendent for comments, and then we said, tell us about this other meeting. And sure enough, she admitted that there had been a disciplinary meeting that had been held prior to this that they did not notify us of this meeting, even though they had to under the open records and open meetings law. The law states that when a disciplinary hearing happens, the press and the general public are notified. The press attends. At that point, a parent or a custodian or a guardian says, yes, they want the meeting open, or no, they don't. If the meeting is closed, we take our leave at their request, and we leave the meeting, but the press and the public are invited back into the decision part of the meeting, in which the meeting's called back to order out of executive session, and the vote is taken in public. Well, we were notified of this appeals hearing, but when we showed up, our general manager, Shannon Hahn, when she showed up, she was immediately asked to leave. She wasn't given the option of hearing the parents say, yes, we want you here, or no, we don't. And she was told to wait in her car. Well, the meeting went on till 4 a.m. in the morning. She didn't wait that long, and so she went home. But interestingly enough, thank you to the FOIA task force and to Joey McCutcheon, a law, I think, Joey, was it in 2018 that was passed that government meetings have to be recorded, which is great for us because at that point we could ask for the recordings. But guess what? They didn't have recordings, and so the past recordings of those secret meetings were not available to us. We asked for the minutes, but as you can imagine, the minutes were very raw. They called the meeting to order, they voted, and they left. And it really didn't even delineate in some instances who voted for what as far as punishment. I'll tell you the background of this story to let you know that the only way that we were able to report on this story was to use the FOIA. So we began to use that. We began to ask for recordings, we began to ask for the minutes, we began to ask for emails, and we began to piece together what had happened in this sexual assault case that the parents of the victims are asking us to write about. They want us to know what happened so that we can report to the community. I mean, to me, the safety of children in the community are one of the most important aspects that you can cover. And so that's what we wanted to do. I think one of the things that we did that I would say ended up being a very effective FOIA for us was through the meetings and through some of the emails, we had figured out that not only had they held disciplinary meetings without notifying us of just in this one incident, but they had had a student at the beginning of the year in August who had been expelled for an entire year because they had brought a gun to school. There was another student who had gotten into a fight in February, and that student was expelled, and they didn't notify us of that. There were training sessions in which they would go and learn about a millage and how they can use that. It had been passed a couple of years earlier, and they were voting on how to use that money. As you can imagine, they were talking about a mask mandate. And just some background on their meetings, the Huntsville School Board meetings, you walk into the boardroom, they're all in this back room having dinner together, and they come out, they call the meeting to order, there's very little discussion, and just an example is the mask mandate. They would vote on whether there should be one or not, and as we all know, that's a very volatile issue in our community right now. I mean, we read all across the country about these school boards where parents are so vocal, but not in Huntsville. It was, should there be one? 7-0 yes or 7-0 no. So it was very odd, very little discussion, but they were having all the discussion over text messages. And so what we did was we issued a FOIA to them, and we found a date that we knew wouldn't be so hard for them to collect all the information, where they could say, well, it's too much information, you need to narrow it. So we narrowed it from the beginning as best we could, and then we kind of tried to sweep all of them, just a blanket FOIA. And we did that beginning February 1st, because we knew some of these results and these issues had come up prior to when we got the report. So we started at February 1st, and we asked for their text messages. And I don't think that the school board ever realized that we have access and a right to those text messages, because they are talking about school business. And when they realized they had to give over those text messages, most of them did. Most of the board did. The superintendent, I think the key was the superintendent had communicated individually with board members and also had been part of a group text. So she knew that she had been caught on violations of FOIA. So when we asked for those text messages, at this point she was nervous, and she knew that she pretty much had to turn it over because she'd been caught in all these other violations. So even though some of the board members involved didn't tender their text messages, we had all of them because she would send and reply to those. Does that make sense? Like, some board members would say, I'm not going to give you the text messages, but it was okay because we got them from the superintendent, she was a party to them. So we were able to build a timeline, and we could see all the discussions that had taken place with the mask mandate, with the training sessions, and most importantly, with this Title IX issue. So we were able to piece together the board's thoughts. I think what's important to note here is the board did not discuss any student by name. And honestly, we don't really want that. That isn't what we're trying to publish. Our job as a newspaper is to hold government officials accountable. So we're not trying to go after students for what their involvement was in the Title IX. We wanted to know what the school district did to handle the situation. And we were able to piece together a timeline of their thoughts and all the actions that they took, and all the votes that they took. And so without FOIA, we would never have known what the school board had done to talk about the actions in this case. Now, interestingly enough, and I think this is something that I learned through this process. I've always been an advocate of FOIA. And I don't mean this naively, but I've always just thought if you turn over a FOIA request, you should get the documents. So 2 things with that I've learned. One, the school district now has been told if you don't have the text messages, you don't have to tender them. And that's true. You know, FOIA doesn't make you recreate anything. You could delete a text message and say, I don't have it. I don't have to give it to you. And that's what's happened as of late in this case. I know a couple text messages, because I have them, that the superintendent has sent. And I also know that she has deleted them because I have the response in which she says, I'm deleting this message. So I think what we now are faced with is combining FOIA with other laws that can enhance FOIA. And one of those laws is the Arkansas Records Retention Act. And I've learned to do some research on that as of late. So here's one of the scenarios. Recently, the Huntsville School District hired an assistant superintendent. And there was an exchange of some text messages and some emails. And whenever I asked for them, I reminded our superintendent that under the Records Retention Act, those records must be kept for a period of years. In other words, you can't just delete an email or a text message and say, well, I don't have to have it. If I don't have to have it, your FOIA is useless. No, under the Arkansas Records Retention Act, you have to keep personnel records and other kind of records. You know, there's a set number of years for each of those categories. Now, granted, that act does not cover everything. So you have to be very specific in what that act requires. But personnel records is just one example. So I was able to say, I need all your emails, I need all your text messages, any electronic messages, including attachments, I need those under FOIA and the Arkansas Records Retention Act. So I think I'm in the position now, because I've used FOIA and I've received text messages that the district didn't want me to have, and they know now that I have access and can receive them, I think they, instead of just complying, I think they try to circumvent. Just delete it if it doesn't exist. FOIA means you don't have to tender it. Not true. You have to keep some of those records under the Records Retention Act for a period of years. So when you combine FOIA with that, then you're able to get the documents that you need. Another thing I think the school district has done that gives me great pause is to use FERPA, the Education Act, in which it does protect student records, and I don't think that that's a bad thing, and I think FERPA does a good job of protecting student privacy. But what the school district has tried to do is to circumvent FOIA by saying we can't give you those records because they're protected under FERPA. Well, what the school district has done, instead of protecting a student's right to privacy, the school district has tried to protect their malfeasance and any nefarious actions that they took in this case by saying, well, if we mention a student's name, we can't give you that document. I had an interesting situation the other day where in the same school district, the school resource officer literally beat up a child, lost his temper and beat up a child. The child went on various news outlets, including came to our paper, and did show, I'm not exaggerating when I say he beat up a child, he had injuries to his face. And the school resource officer is now under criminal investigation for his actions. But again, they used FERPA because there is a camera in the school district's office. And I know that they redacted the faces of the students because they showed it to the student who was beat up, to his mother. And she came to the newspaper and she told her story because she knew that she could trust us to tell the story. So we did issue a FOIA for that. And the school district says, we can't give it to you because that violates FERPA. But what they've done is they've used this FERPA law to protect the bad actions of the school district's school resource officer. So we can push that if we want to, but we also know that because he's under criminal investigation, that investigation will be wrapped up. And when it is wrapped up, at that point, we will get that information from the sheriff's office. So we've gotten to the point where we kind of know, push and pull a little bit.
Right. You did it this time. Thank you so much. All right.
So anyway, I think that
Okay, okay. Well, thank you very much, Kayla. Bye-bye.
I think under these circumstances, I think that the school district has begun to use other avenues to protect them from having to give FOIA documents. And so I think we're starting to see a little bit of push and pull on the part of the school district on trying to figure out ways that they don't have to give us those documents. Joey can speak a little bit to this too.
I don't have my screen pulled up, so I can't imagine you can see me, and I've got my,
I'm getting somewhere. Is there,
I'm sorry.
can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. Okay, good.
Right.
So Joey can speak just a little bit about this too. Joey did a great job in handling this lawsuit. He did sue the school district for their multiple FOIA violations. And I can tell you, from a newspaper's point of view, we were very grateful for that. Whenever he sued, it protected the newspaper in a sense that we didn't sue the school district, so we can continue to cover the story and not look biased in that situation. So it was very important for us, for Joey to stand up and bring that lawsuit and thereby keep us out of it and keep us neutral so that the school district couldn't attack our credibility and say, well, they're suing us, so of course they're not credible, so this story isn't credible. So we were very grateful for Joey for doing that. And he won many points in that case. But one of the things that the court ordered was for the school district to be able to undergo FOIA training. And the school district was told to do that within 60 days. So the time passed with us, and we thought, well, this is interesting. They either haven't done the training or they haven't notified us. Now, what school district or what party to any lawsuit who has been sued and lost on multiple FOIA violations wouldn't notify the newspaper of the training session? And that training session would be considered a meeting, and we would need to be notified under FOIA. Well, we waited for the time to click down, and we saw that the school board was having a meeting on February the 14th, which was day 61. We asked for the documents that would be tendered to the school board meeting and their members at that meeting, and that part of those documents are a check registry. So we went through the entire check registry looking for any documentation that they would have paid someone to come in and do their FOIA training for them. Well, it turns out that they didn't do the FOIA training at all. And I think that's important to note, because even though they had lost on several of Joey's points, they still didn't take FOIA seriously. They still didn't say, oh, we really need to get trained and we really need to do this training within the court mandate. Now, a court mandate's court mandate. When the court tells you to do something, whether you like it or not, you do it, and you do it within the time frame. So I really thought that's a good feeling of how they regarded that order and how they regard FOIA. And FOIA is an incredibly useful tool, but I sometimes think the other party views a FOIA request as laborious and not one of their priorities. And I always love when somebody says, well, I really don't have time for this. And I always think, but FOIA, in my opinion, answering that request should be that should be your top priority. You are getting paid government money to let the people know what their agencies are doing. You know, really and truly, what goes on in a school, I would say, is of the utmost importance to a community. And when you have sexual abuse going on in your locker rooms for 2 years, I think that you would want to be transparent about that so that you could show those parents that you know what's going on and that you're taking care of it and that you're doing something about it. But the school district really hasn't shown that they want to comply very much with FOIA. And I think the SRO situation, school resource situation, is a pretty good indicator that I still don't know that they're taking FOIA as serious as they should. So I know my time is running out. I get on FOIA and I get on this case and I probably I talk too much about it, but I do want to visit with you briefly about the FOIA Task Force and the FOIA Coalition. I was chair of the FOIA Task Force a few years ago, and that is a wonderful tool for legislators. Some of the legislators that we worked with, they took our response very seriously. And what I did in the very beginning was I would scan any bill that was filed during the legislative session. And if it mentioned FOIA at all, I would definitely get in touch with the sponsor, and I would bring that sponsor in to talk to the task force. What's the impetus of your bill? And honestly, many of the legislators were very genuine in the way that they would come to us, and they really had a good reason to have the bill, but they didn't have a concept of the long-term effects of the bill or how that bill would affect people getting information. So they worked very well with us. It was always a good indicator if the legislator took your call or not, took my call. Many of them didn't, and we would discuss the bill anyway, and we would pass on our recommendations to the Senate, the House, and to the governor. And then the House and the Senate would vote on it accordingly. We just really rendered what our opinion was, but it's a really nice task force in that, there are government attorneys on it, there are press representations on it. So it's a very good broad coalition of people who people who use FOIA from a government standpoint and people who use FOIA from the press standpoint. So it was almost kind of a meet you in the middle kind of task force. The FOIA Coalition is it's not part of the Arkansas Press Association, but the Arkansas Press Association is very involved in the coalition. I do believe there is confusion about the task force and the coalition. The task force was created by an act of the legislature. The coalition is much like what you guys are doing. It's just a group of private citizens who come together who are very passionate about protecting FOIA. And so the coalition just renders its opinions on basically how the bill will affect the press and any FOIA bills coming through, how they will affect the press. The one thing I think is daunting to me is that I sometimes think citizens think only the press can use FOIA, which we all know is not true. It is a vehicle. We are a conduit. The press is just a conduit, and the FOIA is just a way for us to get information to the public to better democracy. And it really is used for the greater good. And so I think that I would love to see private citizens become much more involved with using FOIA. I think my time is up, Joey. I'm happy to take any questions or give any other comments that you guys have. And I may have talked too long, and my apologies for that. I am very passionate about FOIA, and so I get long-winded about it.
No, you haven't talked too long at all. I think it was perfect. I tell you what, very, just an excellent example of the use of FOIA. And sometimes what we see is just arrogance of government. And I always say conduct rewarded is conduct repeated. And, just the fact of the training that you talked about, how, you have a court order, a court mandate, and it's just like, oh yeah, we didn't do that. We'll do that tonight and spend a few minutes on it. And it's especially, as you've said, I mean, what's more important than the safety of our children? And
yeah.
And that's why I appreciate your work so much, is that you are, gosh, I mean, protecting our children. Through your work, you're protecting our children. We saw that from some examples that Mike Masterson gave. And I know that the press is, under a lot of attack these days. And but I just think freedom of the press is so important, and that where would we be without FOIA? And to carry that a step further, where would we be without the press to take the information and get it out to us? So.
Honestly, FOIA was the vehicle that we used to break this story. I mean, parents did bring us the Title IX information, but really and truly, a lot of that stuff we really had to protect in order to protect the students, and these students are young. I mean, they are 14, 15 years old, both the perpetrators and those being abused, and so it was really important for us to protect them and focus on the school board. And without FOIA, we would have never been able to do that. We would not have been able to hold the school board accountable. And one thing about that too, Joey, and I know I get long-winded about this, but there were many protests. The school board, the community came out and they protested. They wanted the school board removed. They wanted them to step down, but really their hands were tied. But democracy at work, every school board position but one returning member is contested. There are 18 people on the ballot to run for school board May 24th, and I would, if I could place a bet, I would say we're going to have one returning school board member. And so, you know, the story broke. It broke almost a year ago, but people remembered it. They read it. They knew we got it through FOIA, and what they're running on, the school board, the candidates are running on, is transparency. And you can see it all over social media. All they want is transparency. Those candidates are touting it, and the voters want it. And that's because of FOIA. And thankfully, we had FOIA to do that. And thank you, Joey, for your hard work in always promoting FOIA, because without people like you, I'm not sure we would have a strong law as we do right now.
Thank you. One of the things that, I mean, just what she talked about, I mean, we've got the same thing going on in Fort Smith, where we've got contested races for school boards, where we have just had nobody interested in running for school board. And but to give credit, in Ellen, in the Huntsville situation, obviously Ellen and her work, you've just heard about that. But also a client of mine named Ben Reitzel, who has children in the district, who has decided to have the courage to come forth and be a plaintiff and say, hey, you violated FOIA, and I'm going to be a plaintiff, I'm going to hold you accountable. So important. And now Ben Reitzel is running for school board, and now we get text messages from some folks who we've got a superintendent up there who's recruiting people to run against him.
Well, and also sending a couple emails asking if he's even able to run because he sued the district. Now let that sink in. You have someone who actually is suing the district for transparency and really for the common good, not anything in particular with one of his children, but really standing up for the community and suing for transparency. And the superintendent is questioning whether he can even be on the ballot because he brought a lawsuit. And you know how we know that? Through FOIA.
Yes.
It's important.
Can you talk to us about, as you know, in the Title IX case, and I don't want to get into a lot of the facts of that, obviously, but on the transparency angle, can you talk about, I know that a motion was filed to, quote, seal the record, and what you all did and why you took action with regard to that?
So what they tried to do is simply a gag order. The school district filed a motion for a gag order, and really and truly a very broad gag order. You know, we see gag orders that, and really the courts don't look favorably on a gag order. But this one was not only, hey, the parties involved, you can't talk to the press, but hey, parties involved, you can't even post it on social media. That was I was really surprised at the limitations of you can't post on social media. Haven't seen that one before. But we did intervene in the case only to protect the public's right to know. Because what the school district was saying is, you're Madison County Record, Ellen Kreth, reporters, you're harming students by printing this. The victims don't want to talk about it. It's a small community, and everyone's going to know who the victims are. The funny thing about it was, the school district had granted us an interview and had named 3 of the people involved in the case to us. We never named them. They have no idea who we talked to. We protect our sources because our credibility is at stake. But the school district, in the interview with the Title IX coordinator, she point blank said, oh, did you hear that from so-and-so? And oh, by the way, so-and-so's transferring from the district. I'm sure you'll hear about that. And then named, oh, did so-and-so tell you this? 3 different people involved in the case, she named them outright. And the school district would literally mail out all of their documentation, not certified, And some of the people involved in the case, they never received the documentation. So where it got lost in the mail, we don't know. But what we interviewed and said, listen, we're here to protect the victims in several ways. Number one, we're not going to name them. And number two, they want to know, they want the community to know what happened to them. They want the story out there. And the community also wants to know that something is being done and that the school is being held accountable for its actions, both violating transparency laws and handling the Title IX situation. So the school district lost on that. Joey, I know you had a motion that also said that's not right, and the school district did lose on that motion. Now, just this week, they filed another motion, and we're going to get in and look at that. They want to seal the record from interrogatories and depositions. And so, you know, I thought the court handled that in a really nice way. They said, hey, Madison County Record, don't print the names of the students, and the parties involved, instead of naming the students, you're going to say student 1, student 2, student 3. The only people that will know that are the parties involved. We will have no access to who student 1, 2, or 3 is, but we still then can learn the facts of the case so that we can tell the public what the school district did right and what it did wrong, and are the children safe in those schools. So now we've got to go back and look at this motion that was filed this week on whether what we're going to do about depositions and interrogatories. Again, we're not going after the children, but we have an obligation and a duty to hold the school district and the school board members accountable. And you know what? People do care, or you wouldn't have 18 people on the ballot running for those positions. And honestly, the school board elections right now are the hottest races talked about in Madison County, because people care. They want transparency.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Well, hey, we really, really appreciate you spending your time with us, Ellen. It's been very informative. Let's give Ellen a big hand. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.